Ja Morant is frustrated with the Memphis Grizzlies, and the Heat are emerging as a real option for him. And Anthony Davis' future is now a tug-of-war between Rich Paul and the Dallas Mavericks. The league is shifting fast, and the next few weeks are going to change the NBA landscape just a little bit. We can talk about it all and more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host there, Haize, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go ahead and get into this content today, y'all. And Ja Morant is apparently growing disappointed by the Grizzlies and their trade plans, which this is all leading towards, I think, a Jimmy Butler-esque exit from Ja Morant and the Memphis Grizzlies, and it's all just kind of been written on the wall. Ja Morant is 26 years old, who, when you look at how he's ingrained himself with that Memphis Grizzlies fan base and that city, this is probably a big shock to him. And this fact that the team is ready to move on from him. You know, he was asked about the trade, and he just says, live with it. That was the blunt response that he had to it. Now, you have heard that the Miami Heat are turning to an attractive option for Ja Morant and his camp in the recent days, and sources say that the Heat have been regarded as one of the NBA's most detailed-oriented and structured organizations, a major aspect of the development that appeals to Ja Morant. And I think when you look at the Memphis Grizzlies and what's happened here, right? Like, let's just take a look at the whole total thing that's happened. Of course, one of the best teams in the Western Conference, a team that was looked up as an up-and-coming team that was going to be competing in the Western Conference for years. Between injuries, Ja Morant's suspension, other things going on, they just missed. They missed a lot of time. They lost their footing. They missed their moment. Is the way that I've talked about it before over on Locked On NBA. They missed that moment, right? And then you have, and then the Memphis Grizzlies fire their head coach. A new head coach comes in that implements a new system that takes the ball more out of Ja Morant's hands. You've traded Desmond Bane, somebody who's been there with Ja Morant for years, and all this now is shaped up into a situation where this is probably very unfamiliar for Ja, right? This doesn't feel like the same situation that he's been in and developed in and all that type of stuff, which now has led it here, right? Reportedly, Ja Morant also has a deep respect for Coach Eric Spoelstra, who does run Team USA, and Ja Morant, wants to represent his country in the 2028 Olympics as well. This is all shaping in to be a situation in which the Miami Heat look like a team that Ja Morant wants to go to. Now, that does not necessarily mean that that's where the Memphis Grizzlies are going to send him, as it has been reported as well that the Minnesota Timberwolves and Sacramento Kings and Bucks have all had varying levels of interest in Ja Morant. We had heard that the Minnesota Timberwolves aren't going to make that move at the trade deadline, so that may be something that has to happen more towards the offseason if they wait to move him in the offseason. But with Ja Morant having 3 years, $125 million remaining on his contract, he wants to secure a max contract extension by next summer as well. Sources have said when it comes down to that, we'll see what happens here. But it does seem like, as it stands right now, Ja is probably not going to be in Memphis much longer. Now, does that go to the trade deadline? Do they wait to the offseason where teams are going to have cap space and stuff like that? They very well could. But the key thing right now is getting Ja Morant returning back, which it does seem like he is making progress towards coming back. He's not played since January 2nd. It seems like he's coming. He's on pace to come back. But now it just becomes about, does this turn into a bidding war? And reportedly, the Sacramento Kings and the Miami Heat have been the teams that have been identified as the teams having the most interest in Ja Morant. That comes from Shams Charania, who does say that. So it seems like there could be other teams that are willing to test the market for Ja, if they come out outwardly shopping him. But it does say that right now, it could be. And it's also viewed reportedly as well that teams kind of view Ja Morant as maybe a player that could become one of those buy low options for teams to get in on and trade for Ja as well. So, we'll see. It's going to be an interesting case. If Ja's tenure with the Memphis Grizzlies does end, it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this all shakes out. But according to Brian Windhorst, this was a direct quote from Brian Windhorst on NBA Today. In talking to executives around the league, I just have to report that I don't think Ja's value is very high right now. He's having a terrible shooting season. He's gotten further into his career, and he's dealt with injuries. He's driven to the basket less and less and has shot more and more. Right now, if you're looking at interest in Ja, you're looking at buying low. And that's what I suspect the kind of offers the Grizzlies are going to get. Now, how low could they get? That's a crazy quote there. How low could the options for Ja Morant get? That's what you have to ask yourself, right? with the 2 seasons left on his contract after this year, $42 million this year, $44.8 million in 2027-28. That's the question that you have there. Now, the Grizzlies should be right to ask for the most back. And if they want to start a bidding war for Ja to make sure they get the best package possible, that makes sense. And you don't want to sell low on Ja if you can avoid it, but you do have to let the market be the market. And injuries have piled up for Ja Morant. His play isn't what it once was. There's just no doubt about that. And he is playing a different player. Now, of course, you like to think teams are going to look at Ja and say, hey, it's going to be different here because we're different. And that's what Ja's also hoping for with the reported interest in going to the Miami Heat, an organization that has the reputation that it does have between Heat culture and all that stuff. It leads you to believe that maybe there could be another option there for Ja. And I do think that the Heat, which are a team, and Pat Riley is always looking to trade for another star, they could be willing. I mean, this is a team that had Terry Rozier on it, right? And I mean, technically he's still on the roster, so you have that. I think if you're adapting him into a culture where you already have your veteran and Bam Adebayo, you have young players that have already grown up in the system in like Jaime Jaquez, Khalil Ware has come up. You have Norm Powell there, which a Norm Powell, Ja Morant backcourt, could that simulate some of what Desmond Bane and Ja did? There's a lot of questions that lead you to believe that, hey, maybe it could work. The thing that makes it overall is Eric Spoelstra. Spoelstra is a coach that he knows how to relate to players. He's going to figure it out. If they were to trade for Ja, I truly think he's going to figure it out. Of course, things got to the left there towards the end of the Jimmy Butler era, but I think that's more of a Jimmy thing than we're blaming that on Coach Eric Spoelstra. So, we'll see. And that's not to say that Spo has done everything perfectly well himself either. I think that, Spo is a guy that understands, the reputation that he has around the league as well. So, hearing the Kings and if Ja is going to be moved at this trade deadline, it seems like it's either going to be the Kings or it's going to be the Miami Heat, or you never know. While the Minnesota Timberwolves have said that they're not necessarily interested, they can come back in it with realizing, hey, they could miss the opportunity to trade for him overall. So that's the thing, right? I just wonder how close is the market to Ja Morant to Trae Young? That's a huge question that you have to ask yourself here, because if that market is that low as what it was for Trae Young, that can open the door for a lot of teams to be in that if the market gets so low to where expiring salaries are basically the main thing that the Memphis Grizzlies are looking for. But with them looking to build around Jaren Jackson Jr. reportedly, which they could maybe look to trade him as well, I still always put that out as a possible option there. Regardless of what they say, that's always an option. That's a possibility there. Just got to ask yourself, what's going to be what is the priority for the Memphis Grizzlies? Do they want a package built around young players and draft picks? Are they willing to take the expiring players back with draft picks? Whatever it is right now, that's the question that you have to ask yourself, because reportedly, with that interest not being as high or that value being as high, that could close some doors to the Memphis Grizzlies and potentially trading Ja Morant. But if they want to move him, they're going to move him. Just get a better deal than what the Mavs got for Luka. I think that's where the bar is sometimes for people. But no, all jokes aside, so we'll see. But let me know down below, do you think Ja Morant is moved by this year's trade deadline, or do you think it's more so in the offseason? Let me know what you guys think on that down below. Next topic. Rich Paul apparently wants Anthony Davis traded by the trade deadline, but the Dallas Mavericks are saying that Rich Paul ain't going to bully them, and I love this, right? Like again, not to be too petty, right? But I do think Rich Paul and his agency have gotten too much power around the NBA, and I think you're starting to see teams fight back against that. I think you saw it a little bit with the Lakers, with how they didn't really consult LeBron in the Luka trade, and then this offseason, in their plans for the offseason, they sat down with that binder and had that conversation with Luka versus LeBron. Now you're kind of seeing with Anthony Davis as well, right? So Anthony Davis, for what it's worth, got good news. He went to a specialist. It seems like he's going to miss another 6 weeks, but surgery is not going to be required, on his hand, which is good. It means that he's going to return sooner rather than later. But this one comes from Tim McMahon of ESPN, who says this: it is very clear Rich Paul, who represents Anthony Davis, wants AD traded before the deadline. And why would he want that? Because he believes it's in his best business interest. Because he has taken a will see from the Mavericks regarding an extension as a no. And there are teams where clearly Rich Paul considers it likely AD would get that kind of extension he's looking for and becomes eligible. This continues from Tim McMahon, though. The Mavericks are going to explore the trade market regardless. They have to. This is ongoing. They do not feel like they have to trade Anthony Davis. They're telling me and anybody who will listen that they are not trading AD just to make a deal. They don't feel like they have to unload him. And then going on to say this: they are insisting that they will only make a deal that makes sense for them. And what exactly that threshold is, there's not clarity on that. but in some combination of draft compensation, promising young talent, and financial relief in the form of expiring contracts. Rich Paul is not going to bully us. This is a direct quote from a member of the Mavericks organization. Another member of the Mavericks organization, referring to Patrick Dumont, the governor, Patrick is not going to sign off on a deal just to do a deal. Ownership does not feel any pressure to do an AD deal. This is a big shift. Typically, Rich Paul has gotten almost everything that he has wanted and with his clients. He's been able to kind of dictate markets, get his players traded to teams with other players that he represents, which then gives him more power in that organization because he has multiple players that are on with Clutch Sports. So that's the thing that happens here. And so now we're hearing that basically Rich Paul is losing that. And, they do want to apparently be competitive. And I know they still are preaching this thing of waiting until Kyrie Irving comes back to really see what this team looks like. But it does not seem like the Mavericks are going to look at Rich Paul and here's your request and say, okay, bet, this is what you want. This is what we'll do. They're basically looking at it and saying, hey, we hear you. Thank you for that. But we're going to do what's ever in the best interest of our team. And whether that's keeping AD, trading AD, we're going to send him to whatever team we want to. You don't have control here. I think it's important. Agents have gotten too much control, mainly just Rich Paul. He's gotten so much control around the NBA that at some point you were going to see a reaction like this. It's like when the player empowerment movement. You started slowly but surely seeing other teams fight back against the player empowerment movement. That is basically what's happening here on a smaller scale. You are seeing teams fight back against what Rich Paul is trying to do. Now, so far, it's a couple of organizations, but once those organizations see that you could be successful in that, what doors is that then open to this to happen more and Rich Paul to continue to lose more and more power that he has around the NBA and that clutch that he does have, which Clutch Sports, but he does have that around the NBA's neck to some degree. So, that's what's basically being done here. Now, as far as the Anthony Davis trade, listen, it goes to the same thing. Now, with Anthony Davis returning back and him not having season-ending surgery, does that make teams back in on Anthony Davis? I still think the injury, if you were a team that had concerns about Anthony Davis and his injury history, that those concerns haven't gone anywhere just because he's not having yet another season-ending surgery. It's still there because the potential was still there, and the potential is still there. Even if he does return, that hand could easily be hit, and we're right back where we left off at, right? And so with also the monetary part of it with Anthony Davis, that's what raises so much concern here, and that's what the Mavericks and other teams are going to have to try to figure out if they do want a trade for Anthony Davis. So we'll see what's going to happen here. Ultimately, I still think probably an offseason move is probably going to happen. Moving a $58 million contract is so much to do, at the trade deadline. Not saying that it can't happen, but I think when you have teams that have kind of more cap space to absorb it, they have more flexibility, those type of things, I think that may be what you're looking at happening here. But, we'll see what happens with Anthony Davis. I do think he's going to be moved. I don't know if it happens this trade deadline, but the team that moves him, boss speed on that one, because who the hell knows what the hell Anthony Davis is going to be as far as on the court, off the court. You just never know. It's Anthony goddamn Davis. Like, the dude can have a season-ending injury stepping up off the toilet. Like, you just never know about Anthony Davis. So let me know what you guys think down below in regards to this. How do you feel about the Mavericks fighting back against Rich Paul and basically telling Rich Paul, listen, you're not getting your way here. We're going to do what's best for us as an organization. That's what we're looking at. That's what we're reviewing. If you don't like it, oh well. Basically telling Rich Paul to go fuck himself. But nonetheless, let's get into the last topic for today. Zach Edey is going to miss at least 6 more weeks with ankle stress fracture. And this was always a concern with Zach Edey, right? The injury part of it. Not only, when you have somebody that's a big human like Zach Edey, lower body injuries have typically been the death knell in a player, especially if you experience a lot of those early in your career, being 7'3", 305 pounds. Now, for what it's worth, Zach Edey's averaging 13, 14 points almost, 11 rebounds. He's averaging almost 2 blocks per game. Like, there's just no doubt that Zach Edey was better than I gave him credit for coming into the NBA. And I got to hold myself accountable to that. He can legitimately be a center in this league, playing 25 minutes for that. But the injury concerns, and that's always the thing. Once big men start having those lower body injuries, things typically don't get better from there. They actually get out there. But the report is Zach Edey will remain on his current plan of offloading and rehabilitation when it comes down to that. He's a player in only 11 games this season after missing the start of the season as well after an off-season ankle injury. He didn't make his debut to November 15th. He's now back out as well. You look at the things that have improved for Zach Edey. His shooting has definitely improved. His free throw shooting percentage has gone from 63% to 78%. So there's no doubt that he's improved as a player in year 2, he's just not out on the court. And that's a big hit for this team also. So, we'll see. His absence creates a huge void for the Memphis Grizzlies. We'll see if they can overcome that. But Zach Edey is going to miss another 6 weeks, which, like I said, once a big man starts missing that type of time on those lower body things, it doesn't typically get better. But we shall see. But let me know what you guys think on everything down below. That's going to do it for today's episode of NBA Central. I want to hear from you guys down below. Should Ja want out, and should they trade him to the Miami Heat? Is the Miami Heat the right spot for Ja Morant? And what should Dallas do about Anthony Davis? And I guess Rich Paul in that. Drop your thoughts and takes down in the comments as well. Hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel if you're not subscribed to NBA Central. Make sure you guys are following us at NBA Central Pod. You send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show at gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the #1 spot for everything basketball related. That's thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, I'll see you guys the next time I feel like making a video. Probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.